So that's kind of like adding, having that little bit of like extra experience. I'm trying to do that when I see your party. And maybe like 3 or 5 years, I feel I'll expand. Right now, it's not like they do have like a lot of these markets. And then outside of that too, we also have kind of like scale. Brandon, so it's like helping those stage companies. It's like, I need like a fractional season. I cut my hand. Good to see you. Cut your hand. Just I don't know. Noah, right? I was say like a fractional season. Or if not, you ready? I wasn't in business as well. I've asked you like if you like want to like on the portal and I get you like good answers. Yeah, I can get all of that. Well, you know, now it used to be more like what should I ask? I'm not taking really good answers. Well, they are like so it's like you ready? I got it. Okay, I had a feeling you were ready. I don't know. Good question, and it's like, okay, how do you like can you give him a shout for like my Amazon? Yeah, actually. It's kind of the game I have here. That question was so good. I'm ready. I was easy to work on. Yeah, there's just like some other investor. Yeah, be up. Just like non-biased education. Because you know how like education is going to get I think they're trying to do that. I don't know how like University of Austin, I think people are Is it like is it same kind of style of university, or is it like, I remember some people talked about like their criticism of universities, like there's so many kind of like classes you take and all like that we're trying to get into. So it's like almost a trade school for your specific major in a way? Or is it still like very like... I think it's like a typical liberal arts like college education. But they don't, it's not an accredited university. So it's going to take some time. I gotta look it up. Yeah, good to see you. Yes, good luck. I know. One of them will be me. I have a lot of confidence.
All right, everybody, if you wouldn't mind making your way to a seat, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and fill in these seats here in the front. We've also got some tables and high chairs around the back. Go ahead and find a seat. I will also invite Cole and Bryce up. They can go ahead and get situated. And then once everybody finds a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for coming out.
Brendan, right? Yeah, Brendan, yes. Good to see you.
What brings you here, Les?
Friends with Bryce.
Oh, Bryce,
Speaker, yeah. What brings you?
All right, welcome. If you guys can grab a seat, we've got some front rows open. We can put some more chairs out. Come on, who's brave enough for the front row?
I'm looking forward. I love learning about what.
Y'all get your questions ready.
This guy has a question ready, I know it.
He's ready already. All right, well, welcome guys. This is our fourth Trends in Tech event. Can y'all hear us in the back? Is it loud enough? It's good? Awesome. Let me know if it's not. I'm going to introduce Bryce real quick. I'm going to read this to make sure I give you due justice. So Bryce is a software engineer, co-founder of Noble Joe Coffee. If you haven't tried it, you really need to try it. Best coffee in Austin. He is also the CTO and co-founder of Importal, which we'll learn more about tonight. And most importantly, he's a good friend, and he's a runner that we've gotten to know each other at run clubs. Importal is a generative AI-founded SaaS product that is innovating in the import and compliance space, which I know nothing about, so I'm excited to learn. And they are changing the way that companies and their compliance departments approach their relationship with their suppliers. So everyone welcome Bryce. Thanks for coming on out. All right, Bryce, before we get into the weeds of logistics and supply chain, tell us a little bit about yourself just as a person. What do you like to do? What's your social scene in Austin? Let's just get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so that's funny you said I'm a runner. I don't know if I'd describe myself as that, but yeah, so I've been in Austin about, I want to say 7 or 8 years now. Originally from the Pacific Northwest, and then I went to Baylor. That's how I got down to Texas. Studied computer engineering and at Baylor with a few of these guys here. And then and then I've just been in Austin working in the tech scene. And then kind of started to dip my toe in entrepreneurship probably the last 4 or 5 years with the coffee company, and then now with Importal. But let's see, fun facts about me. This is always when you go around the room and someone's like, "What's your fun fact?" And I say, well, I'm a twin. That's kind of fun. I have a twin sister, and then I love playing basketball, so that's the other one too.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Okay, you were a software engineer when you started your career. What was the moment when, a lot of people can be an engineer their entire career, have great careers. At what point did you realize you wanted to start your own thing, to be an entrepreneur? Was there a pivotal moment where you kind of wanted to break out?
Yeah, I was thinking about that a little bit as I was kind of thinking about this tonight, and it's kind of interesting. When I first started my career as a software engineer, I was 100% had no idea what I was doing, even though I studied computer engineering in college. And I remember my first role out of college, I was working at Charles Schwab, just being a front-end developer. And I remember I was put on a team with a couple other senior engineers, and they really were the only reason I was remotely successful there. So that was kind of how I started my career. And I remember being like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And that was the first part of it. But as I got some mentorship and I took small steps. I remember about 3-4 years into my career, I'm like, okay, I at least know what's going on now, And I think we kind of have that point a little bit in our careers where we've been at the same role enough to where I'm like, okay, at least I'm giving back what people are expecting. This is good, I'm getting green lights. So I kind of had that moment, and I feel like that started to remove the imposter syndrome a little bit, and that was my first step to being like, okay, maybe I can do software engineering. Maybe I'm not just, gonna have to pivot. So yeah, anyway, that was probably the first time I saw that shift in my career.
Yeah, awesome. So how long from when you started having that feeling till you actually made a leap and went for it? And was Noble Joe the first startup that you got involved with, or did you have another startup before Importal?
Yeah, so some context. So about that time, that was probably the 2018, 2019 timeframe, I started to kind of dip my toes into the startup scene a little bit. So I still focused on my full-time job, which was kind of working in a lot of these tech consulting companies. And I'd get gigs with, I mentioned Charles Schwab, a couple government agencies, General Motors, and that was kind of, valuable for me from the day-to-day, but I kind of was like, what if I wanted to learn this technology, or if I wanted to grow my cloud skill set? So I started to kind of just moonlight, maybe 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, with some Austin startups. One was an oil gas company called Fuel SQC, another one was kind of in the automotive industry, and I started to kind of get a really good understanding of not only how startups work, but also how multiple different tech stacks work. And I think the biggest thing for me there was, okay, if I know how multiple tech stacks work, I kind of am getting this general feel for, okay, this is best practice for running a cloud organization. This is best practice for using these types of front-end technologies, back-end technologies. And there became this time where I kind of shifted from being, okay, I'm like not just, trying to hang on here and understanding it, to being like, okay, well, maybe I could actually start doing this on my own. And that shift happened a couple ways. Like you mentioned, Noble Joe was the first time I actually stepped into kind of like, handling a business thing by myself. And so that was the first thing that I did on the business side. I also had my co-founder with Noble Joe, his name's Dane. We also launched like a very failed dating app called Swoovy. No one's probably heard of it because it's just totally failed. But basically the premise was you could, do you guys remember this? Brennan, remember this? Okay, I don't know if I told you about this.
I could have used that.
Yes. So the dating app, the premise of it was, essentially you get connected to volunteer for your first date. And so like if the first date sucks, at least you did something good, right? And our slogan was get together to do good. So, I mean, total fail, but at the end of the day, it was like really valuable and teaching me one big lesson, which was people will like an idea or will like a product or service. That doesn't mean they're gonna pay for it. And that was like the biggest thing I learned from that. And so I think we took that learning. That was something I kind of continued to learn at Noble Joe. And then, as Noble Joe grew, I also started to, I switched companies from, I was working at a company called Intersys that got bought. And then I took a new role at a company called Slalom Consulting. That was my last role before Portal. And I started working, I got a client role at Amazon, and then I got a second client role at Amazon, and then I got a role at a data analytics firm. And then eventually I got a lead engineering spot at Apple while I was there. And that was an 18-month role where I had flown out to New York a few times. And the big thing with that, and I think it was really the moment where I said I could really take the leap into the startup scene, was being a part of a company where I saw, okay, not only do I know this is how to build technology holistically, but this is how the best companies in the world are building technology. So like I could hold my own if I started my own startup and someone were to come at me and say, why are you doing this? This is like, if I had that imposter syndrome. I said, well, like I did this for 18 months at Apple. Like I know how this is being done. I did this for 10 months at Amazon. I did it for another year at Amazon. So yeah, that was a little bit of where I kind of converted that to take that full leap.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, let's get to Portal. That's why we're here. Why supply chain? Obviously you're an engineer. You can build a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of talented. I met a few of you that are software engineers. How did you kind of niche down into that industry? What did you see in the industry that was missing that really you felt like this is our spot where we should land?
Yeah, so it all kind of goes back to July of 2022, so almost 2 years to the day. So a guy I know from Baylor, his name's Graham Anderson. He is a third generation customs broker. So he, and just for context, a customs broker is essentially someone who acts on behalf of an importer to deal with U.S. Customs to import a shipment or just anything you need into the United States. And the best metaphor I give is, when you're dealing with the IRS, you hire an accountant, right? When you're dealing with importing, you hire a customs broker because they're well versed on all these intricacies of U.S. compliance law, whether you need a license to import that specific item or whether you need to pay this duty rate, all these things, right? So he approached me at a friend's wedding, and he's like, hey, you do software stuff, right? And I kind of chuckle looking back because 9 out of the 10 people that come up to you when you're a software engineer, if there's any other software engineers in the room, you'd probably know this, they're like, hey, I have an app idea. And you're like, okay, tell me more, And it's usually like, okay, it's Uber, but for some really unneeded use case. And you're kind of like, well, first of all, like, I can look on Google and that's already been done, but, and then you ask like 2 or 3 clarifying questions and the idea just falls through. But he really had this unique idea, and I loved he pitched that business idea to me the next week because he had worked in the industry at a company called Flexport, who's like the largest supply chain company, I think, in the world right now. But he had seen this issue in the industry where he'd consistently have small to medium-sized businesses come to him because he was working as a customs broker there, and they'd say, I don't know what my product classifications are to import. I don't know what my duty rates are. There's all of these different use cases where you have to, be really well versed in compliance law in order to, compliantly import in the country. And, to say, it's crazy to think that companies that are making, hundreds of millions of dollars a year are guessing. It's something we consistently are seeing. And so not only the small shipper who ships 5 to 10 times a year, but the shipper that's shipping 250 to 500 times a year are still doing the same things in a lot of ways because they don't have the money to pay a $5 million trade compliance department or an $8 million trade compliance department. So that was kind of the problem he came to me with, and he said, well, could you build something like this? And it was kind of the start, well, not the start, but when generative AI was really starting to get hot. So, he's really an expert in that area. He knows all this trade compliance law and import compliance law, like the back of his hand. And he kind of said, could we somehow inject technology, automation, generative AI, and things like that into solving this problem? And I mean, I'm the kind of guy that says yes to everything. So I was like, yeah, we can do that for sure. So that's kind of how the problem got started, or the company started.
Awesome. Well, don't go too deep because not all of us, like myself, are technology guys. But from the generative AI side, talk to us a little bit about how y'all are innovating, how you're working in your AI model into more just kind of the business use case of your product.
Yeah, so a good way to explain kind of high level of what we're doing, and then I won't go too deep, but I'll nail down a little bit, so we're a hybrid business where we are a customs brokerage, so we have our brokers, like my co-founder, another employee, that are helping people manually clear customs, doing import-related services. So those are kind of like a transactional type of business model that we have there. And then on the software side, we're building kind of like a suite of products to help them deal with the government. So then when our brokers are dealing with the government, they can have some software, and then also have some customer-facing products. So we're kind of that liaison between the importer and the U.S. Customs. And so so when you ask the question of where generative AI or kind of automation comes into play, kind of the idea of all that tribal knowledge that my co-founder has, right? He's gained that over 8-9 years in the industry. And sometimes we receive data from, a government source or from, a importer, and it's just wrong. He's like, I've seen this information's wrong. How do we kind of reconcile that? And if you were just to kind of directly interact with an AI model, it might not give you the right answer. So we're trying to use models with, kind of supplemented with our broker's knowledge to kind of help train it and say, okay, well, you need this import service done. We've already trained it to say, well, if you follow A, B, C, and D, you can get to that outcome. Or, hey, we need this, we need a general duty rate for this product, So we're kind of building that data ecosystem right now to get to that. But essentially being able to, come up with an audit trail, if somebody asks us for a service and we supplement it with the application and with AI, and then, at some point, U.S. Customs comes back and says, hey, why did you handle this way? Why did you do that? And we say, well, we have an audit trail, we have a decision tree that we went through to make sure we're doing this compliantly too. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're using our broker's knowledge, and we're trying to supplement that with some of the benefits and the power of AI to do that.
Yeah, awesome. I work with a lot of startups, and I feel like some of them face the problem of they've got amazing engineers and they don't have that industry expert. Or they've got an industry expert and they have to outsource the decision making on the software side. And it's the fact that you guys have that partnership is so valuable. Curious about who your competitors are, whether you want to name them or not, but how are you dealing with your competitors? How are you approaching and kind of differentiating yourself uniquely in the market? And also curious, as we're kind of wrapping up, if you guys got questions, I hope you have questions. I feel like that's the best part. But what's next for Importal? What's the future? What's the next year? You can talk about fundraising. You can talk about new product launch. Just curious about where y'all are going.
Yeah, so the customer's question is interesting, the competitor's question is interesting because from what we've seen, there are people who are trying to solve small tidbits or small kind of sub-verticals of what we're doing. One thing that's a common issue is somebody might have, we work with a lot of retail and apparel companies because they have really complex product lines. So, if a athletic brand wants to come in and introduce 500 new products the next quarter, They have to go in, because most of that manufacturing is done overseas, they have to come in and quantify and classify each one of those with a corresponding import classification that U.S. Customs gives them. So they're like, how do I do this, right? So there's companies that might be just maybe innovating in that space, or innovating in the, passing back the duties space, or there's about, I would say, 20 to 25 different, import compliance related services that maybe someone's importing in 1, 2, or 3, but we haven't seen anybody that's been trying to holistically do what we are, or that is doing it as a customs broker too. They're pretty much just pure SaaS plays. And that's been something, kind of transition to your next question about like where we're headed, is something that's kind of been probably, it's really how you look at it, but it's been something that some VCs look at us and say, well, like, you guys have transactional revenue, you're a brokerage, we don't like that, we want a SaaS model, we want SaaS revenue. And we're like, well, that's part of our business, but it's not only our business. And we look at that as a benefit because we have like, this really, the multiple, sources of revenue in our business. But it's just kind of an interesting dynamic because some people who understand our business are like, this is great, we're excited about it. Other people are like, no, you're not, you don't fit our profile. So, looking forward, what we're doing is we have a couple cool features that we're building right now. I'm building a lot of this stuff on the broker side. So, if my broker has 15 different steps they take to make sure somebody's shipment goes from origin port to customs cleared, I'm working on automating like 12 or 13 of those. So, that's going to be a long process. It's not going to be something that's done overnight, but if I can get 3 of them done in the next 3 months, that's like an hour of my broker's time back, maybe a day, but maybe that's just a week. We'll see how it goes. But so that's what I'm working on. I'm kind of working on some of those automations. And then one of my other engineers is working on more of kind of the customer facing roles. So, the most common thing we see is, how do I understand what my total landed compliance costs are before I ship? Because, a little bit of like a crazy story, we had a prospective customer reach out to us yesterday. And I was chatting with you about this, and what's so funny is they were like, they had no idea, and this happens a lot, but it's just a crazy story. So the individual and their company imports hospital mattresses from Taiwan, and there's these unique laws called anti-dumping or countervailing duty laws. And what this means is you basically, sometimes in foreign countries, if there's like a artificially low price that they're importing, then it's anti-competitive to the United States. So then, for example, President Trump in his last term introduced this, and other presidents have introduced this, but they'll sometimes levy like 600% and more tariffs on these to make sure that they basically balance out with domestic manufacturers. So this individual had heard, basically had a shipment go out in April, and had heard that these went into effect in March, and then didn't know about it, and then they got hit with a $623% duty, $196,000 bill, and they're like, I don't even know what to do, I have to get an attorney, and my business might go under. Like, that's kind of how bad that is. So anyway, we have a lot of like horror stories like this, and so one thing we're really trying to do is like give that kind of compliance insight, not only like the total landed cost, but other useful information that they can know before they ship, so that they're not getting slapped with these like big fines and fees, and in the worst case scenario, their business has to fold.
Yeah, wow, you guys are solving a big problem. I'm curious more, Bryce, as the co-founder and not just the CTO. If you could start in Portal again, what are some things you've learned in the last 2 years about fundraising, hiring? I talked to 1 or 2 people here that are in early stage startups that you've learned as a co-founder that are mistakes maybe they won't have to make from what you say now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like so I've been doing this, we launched in Portal July 22. I quit my job with Slalom last fall, so like October, because we got our first round of pre-seed funding. We raised about $600,000. And I feel like this first wave, I was kind of like, well, whatever, the way this goes is the way I know it, right? I didn't really know what was best practice, I guess, in the space too much, because I didn't know whether if a VC told me one thing that was right or wrong, because I was so new to the startup journey. But I've now, same kind of dynamic I talked about earlier in my career, like I feel like I've now gotten into it enough to know, wait, that was bad advice. This is good advice. I've talked to enough other co-founders, and so a couple things that comes to mind. I think the biggest thing, and I could talk about this with Noble Joe experience too, is we have a lot of presuppositions of like how to build a business. Oh, I want to build this technology business. I want to build this type of bakery or whatever it is. And you might have presuppositions on what people want, but until you actually spend time like getting their feedback and like in a detailed way talking to them about it, then you're really not going to know fully like how to grow your business. We were saying, okay, we're going to build this dashboard in Portugal. We're going to build this dashboard, and it's going to be great because we're going to showcase all of these cool features. And everyone's like, this is like 60% done, and we thought this is the coolest feature ever, right? But for their use case, it didn't solve the problem. And so we kind of had this problem for early on of like we were building in the dark, and anyone else who's in the startup scene knows that term of build in the dark. Don't build in the dark. Like you want to always be iterating on customers and say, oh, I want to build this, what do you think? I want to build this, what do you think? And so and then to my point earlier, not only do you think that's a cool feature, would you pay for this? Does this improve your business process enough to be like, I'd pay for that. Okay, how much would you pay? Would you pay $100 a month? Would you pay $150 a month? And so that's kind of been something that we've iterated on, because once you feel like you've at least gotten a good hold of like, there's a problem here, it just comes down to like, okay, have we built some feature to solve it? And then secondarily, do we plug that feature in the right way? I was talking to someone earlier, like, we have all this compliance data, but where are we going to send it? Do we want to put it in our own app? Do I want to put it in like an ERP system? Do I want to send it, in our public API? So there's all these other ways we can take this information and these valuable things we have, but some people are saying, well, I don't want to log into another application, okay? I have 5 of those. Like, I don't want another one. I don't want another dashboard. I have to get familiar with this. So like, well, like, what if we plugged it into your NetSuite, And they'd be like, great, I don't have to do anything new, So those are the kind of things you have to think about, like, how can you be, you can have a core, thing you're solving, but you just might be like, need to just tweak the way that you're actually delivering it, so people are like, oh, this is amazing, like, I'll pay for this, what I'm saying?
I can relate, as a team of product builders, I feel like the most painful thing we see that happens is we build a beautiful, powerful piece of software that doesn't have a good go-to-market strategy, or they haven't gotten good user feedback, and the product doesn't sell itself. So important. Okay, last question from me, and then we're gonna send it out to the room. What's next for Bryce? Let's say in 10 years, Importal has taken off, you've sold it, or it's running its own ship. Like, do you have other visions of other companies you want to build or spaces you want to get into?
Oh, good question. Well, I want to get Importal to Series A. That's our goal. We're kind of like raising a seed round right now, and then Series A is like our big target right now. We have all these revenue goals, so that's on my near-term horizon. I think long-term is I really enjoy I've been able to take on the CTO hat, and I've stepped into kind of the business side of things. I think it'd be really cool. I've always said, like, just come up with the right idea. Like, easier said than done, right? But come up with the right idea, and like, I'm like, it'd be really cool to just put on both hats a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Because I'll come in and suggest to my co-founder, hey, like, you help with me on this kind of finance side stuff. He's like, just focus on coding. That's all we need right now. But maybe down the road, that'd be a cool thing to take that on, and like, I feel like there'd be so much I could grow on just on the business side of this. Like, what does this look like from a monthly burn rate, and what is our, all those business-related metrics. I'm not gonna just try to throw them out, but I've been learning more, but it'd be a cool thing to take on in my next thing down the road, maybe.
Yeah, awesome. I was already talking to someone about you kind of a unicorn already in the sense of you can build, but you're also, getting the business skills, and then you're personable. A lot of times engineers can stay in that lane of just coding, but it's awesome that you've already been able to stretch all those different realms. Awesome. Okay, let's open it up to the floor. What are some questions you guys have? It can be techie, it can be business, startup.
So it's funny that one of my favorite events I used to go back is the thing in Europe. It's called Fuck Up Nights. Essentially, your biggest mistake or failure in starting a business. I heard a lot of cool lessons that you learned along the way, but like, what was one of your biggest failures in starting a business at the start or in any kind of professional endeavor? Like, what did you take away from it? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. I'd have to think about that. I think, I think one thing is, when I first was starting Noble Joe, I feel like I did not have a great attitude, and I kind of felt like this is my role, this is kind of what was prescribed to me based on kind of our business partnership. And you know, when there was times where things would fall out of that, I'm like, well, that wasn't really kind of expected of me, so I'm not going to step out of my comfort zone on that. But I think that just was not a good way to, if you want to be a leader in a company, especially if you want to be someone who's the business owner, there shouldn't be something you would sit there and say, I'm not going to do this, you know? And I feel like my co-founder of Noble Joe, he was the majority owner, and I feel like he, I said, well, you know, this is more of his thing. I have another gig. I'm doing this kind of, you know, in this capacity. And I just feel like that mindset was really not conducive to a good business relationship. And not only that, but to the example that employees would see. They'd be like, well, why is he not wanting to do that, you know? Like, and I think regardless if it's with Noble Joe or with Importal, like, if I need to go out and like redo our website with Squarespace, or if I need to go out and like do a marketing campaign, I'll figure it out. Like, I'll go do it, right? And it doesn't mean I know how to do it. You know, maybe I'll have ChatGPT help me. But the thing is like, I think when you set that example, you're like, your business is going to be on a much better trajectory, because you're like, you know, I think that some people put themselves in a box on this is what I can and can't do. And maybe that's a good way to say like, hey, those are my strengths and those are my weaknesses. But when you're early on in a business, I don't think you have the luxury of saying, I can only do this. You know what I mean? When you grow to a certain point, I think you can. You know, like you establish something, you've gotten a product or service. But I would say I had a bad attitude about that, and I'm glad like my co-founder kind of, you know, gracefully coached me up on that. So.
Awesome. Yeah, in the back.
First, thank you. I have a question about compliance specifically. No one in the room hates compliance more than me, including you. Two of the early stage companies that I work with, telehealth and sales tax, are both very heavily compliance related, as is your business, yes?
Yeah.
So I'm curious briefly, as a small company, how do you deal with the vast number of compliance related components, different jurisdictions, the changes that constantly need to be made, and the interpretation of those rules? You could put an army of people to constantly update these things, and you are ultimately responsible, I'm assuming, to your customer to get things right, because if you don't, it costs them money. So if you could just very briefly talk about how you deal with, if you understand what I'm asking, how you deal with all of that, because it's not cut and dry. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So the question was kind of basically how do we handle, you know, handle compliance kind of holistically, because there's so many different subcomponents and all these challenges that come with it. So one thing we do, and this is kind of a standard when you're a customs broker, is we have a, you know, our legal team and us have put together a customs power of attorney that basically provides us for a certain amount of responsibility related to our specific services. So data in, data out kind of thing. That's kind of what's helped us. So if someone provides us with some information and then we file, a customs entry on their behalf from that, then, and if customs comes back and says, oh, wow, like that was wrong, you're doing something really incorrect here, we're like gonna audit this, we say, well, we're operating with the information that was given to us, and then we have that legal trail to do that. So that's one thing. The other thing is anything from an application standpoint, of course, you have your default terms and conditions, that's a part of it. But we also, audit trails are really important to us. So anytime we're making updates to, an entry, or we're telling a customer, hey, this is your classification, whatever the import service is, we have a really detailed audit trail so that if it comes back and we do something wrong, or even, the application does something wrong, like, hopefully our testing will proactively get that, but when it doesn't, we have this audit trail to say like, well, we did A, B, C, and D, and we made sure that those things were compliant. So I think the biggest thing for us to maintain that is the audit trail, because if we don't, then it's just this black box that we can really, really get in trouble with. So, we really, everything we want to do is like to be on the good side of customs, because when you're not, as that one person importing mattresses learned, it's not a good situation. But we also don't operate as much on the state-by-state basis, which probably would fall into some of the things you were dealing with, which...
You have different countries. You're going to all different countries. That's even probably more of a cluster than what these companies deal with.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, yeah.
I do like the legal thing. Nobody in the room would tell you to run it through legal more than me.
Oh, yeah, a hard lesson.
So I know.
For sure. No, but yeah, we do handle some different countries. Really, at the end of the day, the country of import is what matters when it comes to being compliant. So as long as even if it's Peru we're importing, or Taiwan, or wherever, as long as the laws that U.S. Customs give us for Peru or Taiwan, or whatever the product-specific laws, as long as we're following that, they're the source of truth on that.
So your business is all income.
All importing for now, yeah.
All right, so we started in one state with telehealth, and we had to roll out in all 50 because each state is different. As you decide to go out, you pick the states that are low-hanging fruit, and then you develop the infrastructure. I'm sorry, I don't want to, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and I think.
That's good money, and if you can figure out a way to do that with AI, that's competitive advantage. I digress.
Yeah, no, I mean, good point. And we've had customers ask, hey, what's your guys' export services look like? Because we had a company out of Houston be like, hey, we do importing, but we also export back to Nigeria all the time. And, I guess this is probably another startup learning, is like, don't try to do too much. So I think like, hey, let's solve this problem. Let's create some sort of, traction on this, all this kind of tribal knowledge into our data ingestion for importing. And then if we can be successful with that, I think then we can see like, okay, do we do this with Canada? Do we do this with other countries? And then, whatever that looks like. So those are good points.
Great questions. All right, let's go right here.
Yeah, so relating to that last question, do you say that dealing with compliance is your biggest liability, or is there any other major things that you're aware of for like avoiding lawsuits?
Yeah, I mean, that's big. Compliance for sure. We have a lot of partners who operate in the freight space. So there's this kind of business type called a freight forwarder, and they are essentially who moves the shipment. We don't move the shipment, we just handle the actual importing compliance piece. So like there's some freight forwarders that are customs brokers, but a lot of them aren't. And so we have partners, and sometimes we struggle with, when we have a freight forwarder partner, they might not be operating, let's just say, the most compliantly. We've had some situations where it's like, this could be shady, we don't know, but we're not gonna test it. Like we had a freight forwarder that we're working with from another country who we needed to basically like get information from their importers, and they're like, we'll handle that, whatever we tell you is good. And we're like, well, like that's not really how this goes. And so we had to make a business decision of like, is the revenue worth it? Or should we sit here and say, no, like this is a little bit putting us in a not a good position because we're trusting this person who's not the importer, who's not doing the goods. And I mean, there was one import they had that like got held for, a government exam, and we're kind of like, again, this could be okay, it could be not, but we just eventually said, the revenue's not worth, being in a bad situation with customs. So we just said, listen, like, if you want to deal with us, here's how we have to go about it. And if not, like, feel free to find another broker, but we'd hope to have business with you again. So we had to make that decision.
Awesome, right here.
Yeah, what precautionary features is built into the solution just to prevent the mishaps that happen?
Yeah, you mean just in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Like before I can start importing.
Yeah, so basically if you onboard under app, you have to do a few things to be able to actually be like a verified importer with US Customs. One is you have to basically pay for a bond, and that's like, think about it as kind of like an insurance that you filed with your business EIN, and like you're a registered business. This is a way to just say like, hey, I'm legit, I'm operating in the United States, I have an address. So you have to have a bond, and our application doesn't let you do that without it. You also have to do proof of identity. You have to have like business license docs of registration in the United States. So essentially any company that is importing that is based outside the United States, if they want to import the United States, they have to have like a subsidiary or themselves have a United States address. So those are a few steps we take, and then our application will make sure that we do that. So anytime that they're stepping through, those are some things you need to do. There's a few other steps, but basically those are the big kind of authentication steps. And then I mentioned the customs power of attorney. That's a big one. We cannot do any kind of service or give actual advice until that's signed.
I don't want to forget the back of the room. Yeah, right there in the hat.
Really valuable insights. So when did you particularly know you were ready for pre-seed funding? What pipeline do you have? Wait lists? When did you know that you were ready?
I'll just repeat the question. So she's asking, when did you know that you were ready for pre-seed funding? What was your pipeline like at that point?
Yeah, so we're a little bit of a unique business from the pure kind of traditional SaaS VC growth because, like I mentioned, we have the customs brokerage side. So my business partner set out, he quit his job summer of 2023 and started growing like just cold outreach to people. Hey, I started a customs brokerage business. Like, can we help you import? So he grew some of our revenue that way. And then since pretty much July 2022, I was building our MVP on the side. So we had an MVP and we had revenue before both of the co-founders were full-time, which is kind of a unique situation. And so for us, what sold us on the pre-seed, what sold our investors on the pre-seed side was kind of this idea of, before this big VC market correction we had, post 2022 and 3, where, all the VC money dried up and people, before that, during the boom, you could have a Figma and just like a design, and you could get funding, and you could get a lot of money, and there's crazy valuations, all that stuff. But I think one thing they saw was we had revenue, and we had an MVP done, and we had bootstrapped it like less than $100,000 at the point. So for me, what they saw was they have metrics, they actually are bringing things in, and I don't think they expect you at the pre-seed time frame to be in the space to where you have a ton of money coming in, but to at least have some sort of evidence of repeatable customer motion is what they always say, like, okay, well, we've ran our product out to everybody in this small space, and they've been paying, or they like it, or they're coming on as customers, whatever that is. And so if you have some sort of repeatable motion, I think they're interested in investing. But I think for us, the boon was really that we had revenue and we had an MVP before we even took a round of funding. You know what I mean? So.
It's awesome. Great question. Yeah, over there in the back.
So as a CTO, how do you decide between technologies? Like, how do you make those trade-offs? Because there's so much stuff, new frameworks, do you do open source, do you not, how do you handle licenses and all that stuff, this type of thing?
Yeah, great question. So he was asking, how do you choose between technologies as a CTO? And I think, I don't think there's an exact science to that. I think you have to balance has the largest amount of developer pool at a given time. That's a big thing you have to consider. And that was something I considered. So our technology stack is TypeScript, front-end and back-end React, Node. We're doing some OpenAI and some of the other generative AI APIs in our back-end, AWS cloud, a lot of things like that. But anyway, you have to balance what is their talent availability, right? If I need to hire and grow, is there a lot of developers, or is this a new technology that only a few people using? That'd be hard. I think when you're looking at what you want to do, so for us, we wanted to do generative AI. So early on when we launched this, OpenAI and Anthropic only had Python and Node.js supported for the APIs. So for us, it's okay, well, if we want to do this, we're only using those in the background for now. It's going to change every 3 to 6 months. But so I think you have to balance what does the talent look like, and what do you think if you're building a best in class, especially cutting edge technology, it's a similar thing we see with the major cloud providers. We always see a couple players move into the space and they're kind of become dominant. It's kind of what you see with a backend Node.js or a Python or something like that. So you kind of got to balance a few things, but that's what we went with, and it's been really good because we can onboard developers really quickly.
Awesome. We got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah, right here, and then we'll go to you next. Yep.
So I have a question about, what do you think is your real go-to-market? Because you say you have one side helping to automate your custom brokerage, which can be served as a SaaS product alone, and also you have the client-facing product.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you I think at some point you kind of have to focus on one thing, who you're really providing. How do you actually what's the rationale behind who you are going to next?
Yeah, great question. So that's the struggle at a pre-seed and seed round. How do the 2 things everyone talks about, product market fit and go-to-market strategy. And I think those things kind of bounce off each other. So for us, we've had moments where we said we need a all hands on deck, consumer-facing application. This is what we need to build in order to get people in the door. And we saw some moderate success, And then we had, okay, well, our brokerage operation is growing so much, all hands on deck on that. For us, I think the best answer I can really give on that is we've made sure that we have the ability to build, I've tried to build my tech stack as dynamically to where if I need to focus on a consumer-facing feature, that's easily implementable. And the other thing I want to touch on that topic is we thought at first, okay, this is going to be a dashboard, and people are going to interact that way, and that's how they're going to get their client compliance data. And to the point earlier, people weren't interested in that. So then they said, well, can you inject this into our own data ecosystem? And that's where the idea of an ERP integration or something comes from. So it started out as a platform play, and then I had an API, a public API that I just had put together to at least have the availability for people to tap into. And now we're seeing more people want to consume the API and do ERP integration. So one of the big things I think we're starting to see in the go-to-market, for our go-to-market strategy is from the SaaS perspective, being able to have compliance data sent directly to people's systems, whether that's Shopify or whether that's NetSuite or whatever that is. So because they don't want another platform to interact with. So that's probably the biggest sales motion we've seen on the customer-facing side. And then this whole concept of just financial what's the word I'm looking not feasibility, but visibility, there we go. Financial visibility at the purchase order level. So if I'm about to put together a shipment, accounting, operations, all these different teams are coming together, do I know my full compliance costs at that point, not retroactively to where, oh shoot, this was 30% more than I expected. So I think that's where we're seeing the go-to-market strategy move towards.
Awesome. We'll do one more question right here, and then Bryce you're hanging out for a little bit, right? We've got the room for 30 more minutes, so you can definitely ask him more questions.
My question is actually pretty similar. I was wondering if you could tell us more about how you validated the problem that you were solving exactly for Inportal, especially when you're making the MVP. What kinds of things did you do? Customer interviews, market evidence. Tell us more about how you had found narrowed that.
Yeah, so we were part of this accelerator at the pre-seed round. One of the VCs that invested in us was a company called Forum, and they, with that, they gave us, with the investment, they also walked us through how to put together a go-to-market strategy, how to, go through all these steps in the sales motions. And so one of the things was, as simple as it kind of sounds, they said, well, the more time you spend with customers, the more you realize if your product actually is solving a problem. And they even just put it down to a numbers game. If you have a 1%, if you really are solving a problem, you can have a 1 to 2% return on your customer conversations and people are actually buying, that's repeatable, right? But they're just saying that the big thing is almost some people who've been in sales from the cold outreach standpoint, a similar thing of just I have 50 customer calls that, the next 2 weeks. And this is to say, check out our product or check out our Figma. What do you think of this? And so we did that, and we just, even I was going out and reaching out on LinkedIn to people and reaching out on, email and just talking to anybody that was semi in the supply chain space, say, hey, are you importing? And do you have this problem? And the unique thing that we saw was you actually, this is kind of interesting stat. Any importing is by default public. So a cargo manifest is the term that they use, but any cargo manifests are by default public. So you can look up any of your favorite companies. If they're really being thoughtful about their clients, they can file to get it private. But really, you can look at pretty much any company and see what they're importing. And so for that was okay, we know who to reach out to because we can go look them up in one of these data catalogs. And so that's not all of them because you can actually file with customs to make that private. But we use data like that, which was unique to our use case, to say okay, who is shipping? Do they fit our profile customer? And let's see if we can come up with an email from LinkedIn. So that was kind of a part of it. I don't know if that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming out. Is there an ask from the Importal side? Are you guys hiring? Are you trying to meet investors? Any way that the community can support you guys?
Just go follow us on LinkedIn. We're kind of growing, trying to get our name out. We are, so kind of latest on what we're doing, we're raising a seed round right now. So we're in the process of that, probably going to finish that up the next month or two. So probably going to be hiring in the next maybe like October, probably start of Q4. So that's our next thing. So we have about 6 employees right now, and hoping to grow to like 10 or 11 maybe. Then we'll see kind of goes. But yeah, that's about it. Just follow us on LinkedIn, follow our journey.
Awesome. Give it up for Bryce. Thank you.
Thanks, Bryce. This was awesome. Appreciate it. And everybody, thank you guys so much for coming out. This was great turnout. We, the Rubico team, put this event on once a month, so please keep your eye out for more coming up in the future. Rubico, we help build software products, so if you're a founder or you are building or scaling a software product to any degree, then come chat with Cole or myself, and we'd love to get connected if you are looking for help in that world. Also want to shout out our sponsor, Meetup. Love having them as being part of this event. I will have Rob come up one more time. I know a lot of you guys weren't here, so go ahead and come on up. Tell us a little bit more about Meetup, and then we'll just keep hanging out, networking a little bit more.
Thank you. And thank you guys for coming out. We did bring a bunch of drinks, and I don't see a lot of drinks on tables yet, so please drink those so I don't have to put those in my fridge at home. But really appreciate Bryce's talk and Cole's. Cole's a great moderator. Can everybody give it up for Cole, please? Thank you. And so with Meetup, we're a startup consultancy, kind of centered around AWS and cloud support, but also expanding into other services like talent strategy as a service, outsourced fractional sales teams, marketing as a service. So really trying to be a one-stop shop for early stage companies and be there to support companies from pre-seed to Series B. That's a little bit about us. And yeah, feel free to look us up on LinkedIn as well, and feel free to chat with myself or Andrew, the tall guy in the back there as well. He's part of the team. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, give him a round of applause. All right, we've got the room for about 20 more minutes, so please hang out, network, and then we'll let you know when we do have to get everyone out. Thanks for coming.